to start by saying that I think we tend to forget until young people themselves remind us that for them the internet supplements or provides all the real relationships that they expect to have in real life. From friendship and loving relationships to meeting new people, sex and entertainment, advice and information. And yet, on the other hand, we've got the parents who often fear the computer. They see the internet as something that is dangerous for their children, and indeed it can be. Cyberbullying is one of the internet's dangers, and really it's our focus in Teen Boundaries. And what listening to young people very quickly reveals is that it doesn't just happen because they are online. It happens for the same reason as in the playground, for example, when someone turns on someone else or a peer group splits up. A 14-year-old girl explained to me how it can start, and she said, somebody commented fat slag on my Facebook picture because she said I looked at her funny at school. The same potential exists for things to go wrong in a friendship group online as it does anywhere else. But it's important to remember, I think, that for young people, the internet represents a tool for successful interaction. Now, fears that parents can have that the internet is something that's out of their control are very real, and often it stems from the fact that it's so pervasive. It doesn't go away, and actually it's hard to monitor, it's private, and it's difficult to be vigilant about. So talking to young people during the Teen Boundaries sessions that we run informs a lot of the advice and support that Family Lives can offer to parents. Well, what does cyberbullying mean then to the young people that we work with? As part of Teen Boundaries, we ask young people to give examples of cyberbullying that they've either experienced or they've heard about. Making horrible comments on someone's profile picture or BBM, sending round a naked picture or video and then posting it online, setting up a horrible page or group about somebody and getting people to like it or write comments. From these and other examples, the two they say worry them most are sexting and online pornography, and that's what I'm going to focus on this afternoon. I think we come closer to understanding young people's relationship with online pornography by getting to grips with why they view it in the first place. And I would like to share with you one reason that isn't the most obvious necessarily, but is the one I have heard most frequently given. When I ran the Teen Boundaries programme with a group of 14-year-olds a couple of weeks ago, one of the boys told me that online pornography is what you use to find out stuff about sex. It's all we've got, he said. I asked why they couldn't talk to a teacher, or a school counsellor, or their parents, and they laughed at me. They said, you don't understand. Asking a teacher is well embarrassing because they might tell somebody else or someone might see me do it. And there's no way I'd ask my dad because he'd tell me I'm too young to be thinking about it. Now, I've been really surprised how many students have said this. Seeking sexual pleasure as a reason to view online pornography is actually fairly low down on the list of motivations. Instead, it's being used by young people, boys and girls, as a source of information about sex and how it works. The Teen Boundaries programme, therefore, works really hard to tackle a lot of this, because from the young people's point of view, asking for help needs to be made less embarrassing. It needs to be destigmatised in some way. As another boy added, I mean, how else are we meant to know what to do? You know, with sex. That's why we use porn. Of course, it is essential for parents and carers to have open and, crucially, non-trivialising conversations about sex with young people. But it's not the parents' ability or inability to talk in this way about these issues that young people are worried about. It's the asking for help in the first place. And what Teen Boundaries do in the workshops we run is set up safe and non-judgmental spaces for those questions to be asked and discussions to be had free from fear of embarrassment. Now, I found what works is to establish a level ground between me as facilitator and them as participants, so there's no dynamic of authority. This is the first time we've talked about this stuff, a 13-year-old girl told me. And I think what she meant by that was it's the first chance they've had to discuss openly some of these issues, either at school or at home. It's also about a gradual approach, and not jumping in at the deep end and saying, let's talk about online pornography. We lay a lot of groundwork, starting with the origins of sexualised bullying, sexualised name-calling, before broaching online pornography, sexting and sexual assault. Now, throughout the programme, it is obviously important to say that we do also encourage students to ask for help once we've left school, whether that's within school or at home, and we do also provide them with the necessary websites and helplines. So, if young people view online pornography for information about sex, or to answer sexual curiosities, or for sexual pleasure, then they come to think that porn equals sex. It's the same as sex, it's just on the internet, one 15-year-old told me very definitely. So, the TeenBoundaries programme sees one of its key responsibilities as challenging the idea that porn accurately represents sex. And that's absolutely crucial, because how they view sex defines how they view relationships, and that comes to critically define what they expect of each other. So on that last point, one thing I've picked up on is the difference in attitude towards online pornography between boys and girls. In a recent workshop with 16-year-old girls, I asked them what they thought of online porn, and whether it was something they had been exposed to or they had sought on the internet for themselves. I don't look for it, I said, someone just sends me a link, or I see it on their phone. And that seemed to be the general consensus among the group. But worryingly, they went on to express how intimidated they were by some of the images that they had seen, and more importantly, what the boys expected of them. Nobody looks like those people in porn, one of them said, and I don't want to do any of that stuff. The same girl told me the story of her relationship with a boy from her year at school. I really liked him, she said, and I just wanted to go out and do normal stuff, like go to the cinema or whatever. But very quickly, he began to pressure her into having sex. I knew he was watching porn because he told me, and I'd seen it on his phone. I didn't like it was gross, but he wanted me to do all that stuff with him. She also said that she felt great insecurity, and as if she wasn't good enough, because she didn't have the same body as the women in the videos that she had seen. Now, this is a story I have heard lots of times and in lots of schools, and that's the problem. Girls exposed to online pornography are comparing themselves to a complete misrepresentation of what a woman is and the role she plays in sex. But this is not just a self-esteem issue. Attitudes towards relationships are skewed to focus only on sex. Getting to know each other or spending time together is unimportant, but that's what this girl and so many others that I have worked with have told me that they want. And so the pornography that these young people experience within a relationship empties sex of any emotional content. It just becomes something that is expected to happen. And from the boys' side, well, during our workshops, I ask boys to make a list of expectations that they have of a potential girlfriend. And the following answers from a group of 16-year-olds are fairly typical. Big tits, good bum, long legs, long hair, tanned. I suggested having something in common might be important, or enjoying spending time together. I could say personality, one of them said, but to be honest, if she doesn't have a good body, I'm not going to get with her. Now, it's not news, of course, that watching online pornography encourages the objectification of women, but actually, as these boys pointed out to me, it leaves no room for any alternative perspective. And so it's not just sex that becomes distorted by porn, but also what fundamentally constitutes being attractive. Boys are also forced to have a list of expectations of themselves. Again, in this class, they said, big pecs, six-pack, muscles, stubble, tan. Now, TeenBoundaries tackles these attitudes by encouraging students to consider the differences between what they see in online pornography and what they desire or have known in a real relationship. And it's here, I think, that we can see the link to the rise in sexting. When I ask a young person why they send a sexual image or video of themselves to somebody else, the answer is nearly always because I wanted him or her to like me. And I think that's really telling. It exposes one of the effects of the wallpaper of sexualised images, including porn, that surrounds young people. That is, when they are forced to make constant comparisons between themselves and the images they see, it's their self-esteem that takes the hit. And what can grow out of that lack of self-confidence is an overwhelming need to be liked. And by that, they mean being seen as sexually attractive. And so they prove it in some way by sending a sext. The TeenBoundaries programme works very hard to tackle some of those ideas about what constitutes being attractive and encourages the definition beyond merely physical appearance. Now that would be great if that was all there is to it, but parents' fears that their children's lives can spiral out of control on the internet are spot on. One 14-year-old girl told me what happened to her. I sent some naked photos to this boy I liked. He didn't force me to do it, I wanted to. He said he liked them, so I sent him more. He sent them on to his mate because he wanted to show off how fit I was. Soon, everyone at school had that photo on their phone, and then someone put it on Facebook. And that's when things got really bad. She went on to explain that she started to receive abusive and threatening messages as a result of that picture. People were calling me ugly and saying I was a slag. Other people just kept asking me for sex. I honestly didn't know what to do, she told me. I was so embarrassed, I thought I'd never get out of that situation. Through TeenBoundaries, we warn young people about the potential damaging repercussions of pressing send, many of which they haven't even anticipated, as well as critically equip them with the behavioural and practical skills necessary to deal if anything does go wrong. And here's the important bit. The TeenBoundaries programme doesn't aim to stop or restrict young people from using the internet or the mobile phones, but it teaches them how to do so safely and appropriately. I had no idea so many people could see a picture if it goes viral, one girl told me in a class the other day when discussing what would happen if a sext was made public on the internet. I hate the idea of teachers or my parents being able to see it, and I never even thought about sex offenders being able to search for it either. The discussions that we facilitate in class often give young people the first chance that they've had to consider the aftermath of a decision to send a sext. I like being able to talk to you, one girl told me. Most people just called me stupid and said I shouldn't have done it, but you're the first person to encourage me to think about why not. In our workshops, we talk about the legal implications of sexting, as well as look at any recent press stories about which the young people tend to have lots of questions. But there is one issue that I think seems to have real impact, and that's because, in the words of a 15-year-old boy, it makes you realise sexting is really serious. You can't just press send without thinking about what could happen. And that is, if a video or a photo gets uploaded to the internet, on Facebook, on Bebo, any social networking site, then it becomes permanent. During our session on sexting, we ask young people to scrunch up a piece of paper into a ball without ripping it. We then ask them to try and unfold it, to smooth it out, to get rid of the creases in the paper. And they all point out, of course, that those creases cannot be removed. We use this exercise as a way to illustrate the emotional scars that cyberbullying can leave, but also the tangible scars, the photos, the videos that are left on the internet, which won't go away. As one girl reflected, no one's ever told us about how it could affect us later on. It's not just about being a teenager. What happens if someone searches my name and they want to give me a job? It's just not worth it. So, let's return then to that question of helping parents to reclaim the computer And I've learned that, to a certain extent, it's the young people themselves who have to do the reclaiming by using the internet responsibly, safely, and being equipped with the skills necessary to cope if anything does go wrong. And that's what TeenBoundaries encourages. I've run workshops with boys who have begun by seeing nothing wrong with watching online pornography and have ended by saying, that's not something I want in my relationship. Girls have finished workshops by declaring, I'm not going to send a naked picture, it doesn't make my relationship better, being with someone is about a lot more than sex. This is the kind of difference that TeenBoundaries can and does make. And again, it would be great if that were all there is to it. But I do have to say, this is something which cannot be facilitated and then never revisited by the school or at home. And in terms of the support Family Lives offers parents, there is a lot to be learned from the young people themselves that's brought out by TeenBoundaries. Work around these issues must be consistent and sensitive to the fact that they are ongoing and often inescapable for young people. Now, I'm definitely not saying that this is a generation lost to a cyber world. I have been so encouraged by how willing young people are to reassess their own preconceptions in their own terms. It's just something more of them need the opportunity to do. Thank you very much.
That was incredibly powerful and informative and eye-opening, and all the things that you probably wanted it. So thank you, that was brilliant. We've already got questions. John.
Hi, Shirin.
Hello again.
Okay. So my question is really about, I mean, this is so important, you know I think what you do is absolutely brilliant. So it's really about how does this link with PSHE in schools? Who is commissioning you? It sounds to me as if it's a few local authorities who are commissioning you to go into schools. But it needs to be broader than that. And in a way, I suppose my question is, how does the TeenBoundaries, Family Lives TeenBoundaries, link with what should be national provision? How does it work with, how does it link with PSHE? And if Family Lives is being asked to do more of this, how are you building capacity? Because really, we need people in all schools doing this. So I'd just like to hear about your thoughts about how it links with other provision and how you're going to build capacity.
Okay. With regards to PSHE and TeenBoundaries' relationship with what is on the curriculum, the curriculum has to cover something around relationships. But as we all know, that could mean anything and isn't restricted to a sexual relationship. I think the best way is to play it tactically when it comes to schools and the curriculum, purely because they all know, every teacher that we have spoken to says, yep, we want to talk about this stuff, we think it's important for our students, but we don't want to have to do it ourselves.
No.
And often the reason why they are put off doing it is because they feel that their teachers haven't undergone the necessary training to put them in a position where they can talk openly and confidently about these issues. And so our approach sometimes with TeenBoundaries in terms of getting it into schools is to say, this is an essential. It's not an extra, it's not a bolt-on, it's not extracurricular. It is an essential that you need within your curriculum programme. We can offer it for you and we save your teachers having to do it themselves. And that really is the basis sometimes of the pitch with which we tackle the schools. In terms of funding, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. You're right that it does come mainly from the local authorities, but as Rosemary's hard work is testament to, there are schools in areas that previously we haven't been working in, Essex being a prime example, where TeenBoundaries within the past 4 or 5 months has taken off, and we've gone from having no schools with the programme to facilitating in several at one go. And so I think our capacity is building, our reach is significantly widening, it's certainly taking off the ground. And the reason being, I think, is that the schools know that they want it.
Thank you. Just in terms of geographical reach, TeenBoundaries came to us just over, I think 2.5 years ago. It was delivering essentially in the southeast into the Patchfield, now delivered in Northern Ireland, with a secured contract in Cornwall, delivered in Birmingham, and we're delivering extensively around the southeast and London. So it is a growth model, but it's funded by trusts and grants, and it's funded by schools. But we probably have greater funding from trusts to deliver this in areas where there's perceived to be a problem than we do from the school acknowledging that initiative themselves.
I can probably answer that a bit more as well at a later point if you want, because I'm presenting about TeenBoundaries afterwards.
Great. Sarah?
I was just wondering, in terms of family lives, whether, maybe not 2014, 2015, but actually when we start thinking about this, that there is some sexually explicit material that we create for families, which can address sexual relationships with young people and with old people, but in the context of good relationships, and to have young people talking about porn and the effect it's had on them and how it's distorted relationships. But to do it in a way that offers them the information. They don't seem to be able to get anywhere else at the moment, which is kind of alarming.
Yeah.
And whether that's something we could really think about addressing.
Yeah.
And then something that can come up when they start, looking for porn. There is some other information to run alongside it, because it's terrifying in terms of its potential impact on society as a whole in the future.
Susie?
Yeah, no, and I think we really do need to grasp this bit about sex education, because I am sick to death of going on radio programmes against people who do there is so much sex education, they have loads of sex education, it's your fault that all this happens because there's too much sex education. To hear from young people who say, actually, we've got nothing, and we turn to porn because that's the only way we can find out about sex. I really need to hear those quotes, and they're very valuable. And just a little bit to drop in with you, I don't know if everybody knew about In Real Life, which is this incredible documentary that was directed by Kidron, who was personally directed Orange the Only Fruit. That's been in cinemas, and I hope it's going to be available on the internet. Everybody ought to watch it, because it is absolutely staggering about what is the internet doing to our children. And she told me that one of the things she found in a group meeting with young people, and she had a group of boys, and she asked them, well, by the way, where do you come? And it took her 20 minutes, and finally having to actually coach and guide them before one boy said, oh, vagina. Because the rest of the 20 minutes was all the other parts of the body where you come on, face, breast, backside, torso, belly button, whatever. And where do they learn that? No, they don't get. And that, that this is normalisation of the body type and the sexual behaviour that so many teenagers are getting is really terrifying.
I think the upsetting attitude that comes out from a lot of that information, that we hear an enormous amount about young people watching pornography, and I think actually we give young people a hard time in the sense that I don't think we give them enough credit for the incentive that they have to go out and find safe information that they think will improve their relationships. And them watching online pornography is them saying, I want to know more because I want to be able to conduct my relationship properly and safely.
They're looking for the good stuff.
So the absence, you're absolutely right, is the resource. It's not the incentive to go out and find information. And I think often that message is a little bit blurred, because young people are tarred with this brush that says that sex is the only thing that's on their mind. And I think that's actually a not very deep enough reading or healthy reading of what's actually going on.
Andrew, Suno, Doro, you've got lots of questions.
A brilliant presentation, excellent. I never had the word mentioned, hardly ever, parents. Do parents have any role in this? And do we have to say anything to the parents?
Yes, but the problem is that they don't have the first idea what is available and what their young people. I mean, that's
no, hold on.
No, but they can't talk to their children.
30 and 40-year-olds parents do.
Yeah,
They do know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it's as if parents don't exist, get into the schools. What about parents? What do we do about parents? Or do we just say they're ignorant?
No, we should be.
But that's why something on the family lives, which encourages dialogue between parents, can be used as part of that.
Surely one of the key dialogues is with your parents.
Embarrassment's a massive factor.
I do understand.
And adolescents, they want to stand alone to me.
Information overload. Information overload. Shut up. Information overload.
One thing is
or are you really aware of what's going on? What are the terrible things that could happen? The teenager says, I'm not stupid, Mum. I know. So I think there are all sorts of things that are difficult, not just because, actually to find out what your teenager's doing is not that easy. It's also this sort of, the teenagers pushing you away as well. So there are all these things. But parents do have a huge role. They have a huge role. And you're absolutely right, there's a big, big gap here because we aren't helping parents. And that's why Reclaiming the Computer is a good title, because parents, there's a huge role for parents, but they don't see it.
And the messaging from Family Lives is very consistent on that. It is about a combination of education and relationship at home. So we never ever change that message. And there is information on the website, but also, it is these types of presentations. And it's also talking to practitioners. I mean, the conference that Shirin spoke at, that John provided, was actually about making practitioners aware that they can take to families as information, that even if they feel unable to communicate, there's things that they can begin to use for communication aids around conversations that are complex.
Yeah, I absolutely support the ideas that have come forward that it's our responsibility to somehow help parents to talk about this and to direct children to the right sources. But, just as you can't substitute parents, so you can't substitute for teachers. I mean, how many teen boundary people can we have? I mean, teachers, you can't just accept, it seems to me, that teachers say, well, we can't do it. We have to think of ways in which maybe we can support and help teachers to get the skills of doing it. Because, you really can't be anywhere. And after all, what you're really doing is teaching them about the subtleties of real relationships. That's what you were, and the consequences of the computer, handling the computer irresponsibly. It's also about what is a true relationship. So their foundation needs, as well, the basic needs, what is sex and what do I do, etc., is in a way still not being answered. And so we still have to look at that more basic issue. So have you got any plans for training teachers?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things that we found has been particularly helpful, I think, especially when talking to teachers about this programme, which either goes one of two ways. It will be met with overwhelming encouragement, or it will be met with absolutely no thank you, not in my school. But what we found helps is the distinction between sex education and the Teen Boundaries programme. We don't claim to offer sex education. It is not a biological introduction into sex and how it works. What we talk about and the issues that we've raised are around sexualised bullying, which of course features cyberbullying and the role of online pornography in some relationships, but it covers a whole breadth of topics, underlying which are basic, I suppose, information about sexism and the role of gender in a relationship. And I think when it comes back to parents, I absolutely quite agree, you can't ignore them. But what Teen Boundaries does is it opens the floodgates. In many ways, we hear a lot of students who undergo the Teen Boundaries workshop and then go home and have the confidence or are equipped with the knowledge with which to then talk to their parents. And it pushes them in the right direction. It gets them thinking, it encourages the articulation of ideas and thoughts, and it leaves them in a position where they think, do you know what, I'm okay, I can seek help and I can ask my mum or dad or teacher or school counsellor for advice, which when you track their journey is an awful long way to go from a group of resistant 15-year-olds who don't want to know and don't want to talk about it. So we do loop parents in and we do loop teachers in. It's just indirectly because we send them the children then once we run the programme.
Is your presentation that you just done for us on the web?
It is now.
Wow.
It's been video.
Wow. It's fantastic.